The first question coming in from an attendee, and it's a big one. If you could each give your thoughts on this. I'm going to start with you, Jimmy, but they're asking, what, if any, effect will the U.S. election have on the DOJ's cartel enforcement efforts?
I think not as much as you would think. So cartel enforcement within the Department of Justice, there's the head of the antitrust division, but the cartel efforts are overseen by a deputy assistant attorney general who is a career official. So typically what happens amid the investigation, amid an election, is that official, if there's a changeover in political parties, he would actually become not just the head of cartels, but the head of the antitrust division as a whole. So I think in the short term, should not see much difference. I think in the longer term, you're going to see movement around prioritization. I think there may be some differences in the 4 areas I pointed to, particularly when it comes to Section 2 and algorithms. Maybe you see a little foot off the gas. But in other areas, cartel enforcement has really been, and I think will continue to be, a space that politically everyone tends to agree. From the more conservative front, it tends to be harm to the free market. From the more liberal side of government, the focus tends to be on harm to consumers. But it really is an area of agreement politically in the U.S. And as a result, I'd expect a lot of continuity going forward.
Thank you. Thoughts from other speakers? No? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to another question coming in here. And this one going to Kathryn, where economic evidence is used to conduct a contextual analysis. How different is this in practice from conducting a full effects analysis?
Thanks, Elizabeth. So in practice, the evidence may well overlap, the economic evidence that is used. However, the objectives of the 2 assessments are quite different. So in the effects analysis, you're really looking at the overall context, rationale, and effects on price, output, and innovation and other parameters of competition. Whereas when you're considering the by object assessment, you're really considering whether the conduct is capable of giving rise to substantial harm. So there you're looking at whether the market itself could sustain cartel conduct as the first question.
Thank you so much. And Jindrich, we have a question for you also, if you could weigh in here. Besides fines, what other consequences can companies face after an EU cartel investigation?
The other consequences, number one, a potential action for damages, a so-called follow-on action for damages that would be filed by the victims in EU national courts. That is a consequence that, is not imposed in the Commission decision itself, but it is something that generally follows that victims would be seeking to recover any damages that the cartel has caused them, and do that in national courts by way of an action for damages. And we have seen really an explosion of those in the EU in the aftermath of the transposition of the EU damages directive. So the last 5-6 years have really seen a huge rise in damage claims for following on cartel decisions. The other consequence, and that one is less obvious, less automatic, but can be considered, is exclusion from public procurement by public procurement agencies. And that, I think, mirrors what it happens in the US, but it doesn't happen by way of a order by the Commission disqualifying the companies from participating in public procurement, but it is a choice that public procurement agencies have to exclude companies that have been found to infringe competition laws from their public procurement procedures. So those would be the two major other consequences than fines.